I'm going to start by reading you the consent for this interview.
Okay.
And then we're going to move on to the questions themselves.
Okay.
All right. Hello. Today is September 15th, 2021. My name is Cristián Doña-Reveco, and I am interviewing Abbie Kretz for the Conversaciones Oral History Project, Voces of a Pandemic project at the Office of Latino, Latin American Studies, and the University of Nebraska at Omaha Libraries, Archives, and Special Projects. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Abbie, that this interview will be placed in the University of Nebraska at Omaha Dr. C.C. and Mabel L. Criss Library, Archives, and Special Projects, and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. If there's something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consent. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are several of these questions that we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. The Office of Latino, Latin American Studies, and UNO's Archives and Special Projects wishes to archive your interview along with any other material and any other documentation at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Dr. C.C. and Mabel L. Criss Library, Archives, and Special Projects. UNO Libraries will retain copyright of the interview and any other material you donate to the Office of Latino, Latin American Studies at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. First question. Do you give the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at UNO's Libraries, Archives, and Special Projects?
Yes, I do.
Do you grant UNO Library, Archives, and Special Projects right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree to allow UNO Libraries, Archives, and Special Projects to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I do.
We have many questions in the pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use the information from the pre-interview to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library and to UNO Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members. So that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and UNO Libraries. Question 5, do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
You mean disregarding private contact info?
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
And last, on occasion, the Office of Latino, Latin American Studies, and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. All right. So, Abbie, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for this project. And to start, I would like you to tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Where do you go to school? That.
Yeah, I'm originally from Schuyler, Nebraska. It's about an hour and 15 minutes west of Omaha. I'm just really proud of my hometown. It's about 70% Latino right now. It has a large meatpacking plant and super diverse now as well, bringing in more like Somali and Ethiopian. So it's a cool place to be from. I got my undergraduate Bachelor of Arts at Buena Vista University in Storm Lake, Iowa in philosophy and religion and Spanish, and got my Master of Arts in sociology at the University of Nebraska at Omaha.
And where have you worked, or better said, how is that you're connected to a Latino community?
So for the last 12 years, I worked as a community organizer with the Heartland Worker Center, which is based in South Omaha. it was really focused, or the organization is focused on providing trainings on workers' rights to Latino, like immigrant workers, basically in like entry-level positions in construction, meatpacking, or the hospitality industry. And that through that position, I met a ton of community members in South Omaha, Latinos, but also North Omaha, and then also across the state in Grand Island, Schuyler, Columbus, Nebraska City, Fremont, but just made connections throughout. Before that, I was a volunteer with the Good Shepherd Volunteers in Lima, Peru. So I was there for 2 years, just working with the Sisters of the Good Shepherd in their works that focus mainly on supporting women and children. So that's how I'm bilingual.
Can you explain to me a little bit what your work was about, sort of in a day-to-day, on a normal day? What did you do working with the community?
I wouldn't say normal, but I will summarize it somehow. I would say like a lot, I mean, in terms of community organizing, it's really about building relationships with the community, which means setting up, I mean, we call them individual meetings or one-on-ones, just to get to know who they are, their interests, issues that they see in the community or the workplace, meeting or knowing who else they're connected to, either family or friends, how they know folks, and then really just looking to identify leaders. And I use that word is very, I mean, a lot of folks don't want to be called a leader because it means a lot of responsibility. But it's identifying people who have a network, like a largish network of relationship, or at least have followers and have a willingness to make the community or their lives better for themselves versus depending on people. So it's a matter of like bringing those like-minded folks together. I'm going to say to kind of conspire to see what they can do to make change. And so we did that. I mean, I know in talking with folks, we've had trainings on like the right to organize, a protected concerted action, or the right to organize under the National Labor Relations Act, organized folks in Nebraska City, even just to have meetings with public officials. So like their mayor, a lot of times it's just not knowing how the systems work, or feeling like you just don't know because nobody teaches you, and you don't have, I mean, in your own country you do, but here it's a little different maybe. We organized like trainings on housing issues, especially with trailer parks. In Schuyler, we had done an assessment with, remember we had a meeting with the superintendent, this was 2015, just to meet him. He was a new superintendent and kind of came with his own agenda, which was fine, but the leader said, no, sorry, we have our own agenda. We're gonna follow this. And through that conversation, again, just meeting him and having him meet the community was important. And one issue that came up was a dual language program. Again, Schuyler is 70% Latino. I think the school system itself is like 90, and they didn't have a dual language program. So over like a 3-year period, we began to work with community members and schools to put them in contact with other dual language programs, explore ways that maybe, and assess how that would work within the school systems. And they now have that, you know, but it's like that, it's kind of problem solving, but in a way that's collective. So yeah, I guess those kind of conversations and work, you just meet people and they tell you about their lives, the struggles they have and the victories, and it's just a matter of building trust and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help to answer the question?
Oh, perfect. That,
all right, cool.
That helps a lot.
Okay.
So moving on to the main topic of our conversation today, when did you first heard about COVID-19?
The winter of like the November, December of 2019, which was when that had first, some of the things started to happen in Wuhan, China. I remember reading about the New York Times.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think about, COVID at the time? Was it something that was going to be just gone, very local?
Something in China, something in another country. It's not going to come here, right? Yeah, I mean, there's been other things that happen in other countries that don't come here, right? You read about them and you know about them, but I mean, I'm not a disease expert, so I don't really, I wouldn't say naive, but just like I'm aware of it, but not really thinking that it's going to come here.
And when did you start thinking that, you know, it was getting more complicated, or things were going to get difficult?
So I'm going to back up a little bit. I think it was probably February. Yeah, it was February of 2020, which I had a friend who went down to New Orleans with his wife to run a marathon, and they came back sick. But then I also had friends probably the first part of March who live in around New York City, work in the city. And they were really freaking out about it because it was so prominent there. And so this was all pre like Omaha closing down around, when was it? St. Patty's Day of March.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess just hearing the fear in my friends' voices that this is real, I was like, oh, still a little naive. I get that, you know, but I would say probably around that time.
And based on what your friends were telling you, did your everyday actions change, or everything was, you were acting the same as in a normal year?
I would say, yeah, probably fairly normal. I think, yeah, I think for the most part, like once most things kind of closed down around St. Patty's Day again, started using a mask more. I think after that, I began to work from home or adjust my schedule a little bit more, was a little bit more wary, or I don't know about wary is the word, but much more cautious of my activities. But I still don't think I was like practicing anything real, maybe until like last fall.
And at the time you were working at Harlan Worker Center, did your work change in any way? Because you, as you were saying, you have constant meetings and contact with other people, either members of the community or officials. How did your work change because of COVID?
Yeah, I started working from home, which for my energy level was super. I mean, I get energy from people, right? And I really enjoy interacting with them. And so we shift to completely working from home, basically closed down the office located on South 24th Street. So do you want me to go quiet her?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So
Okay,
you moved to start working at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even the meetings that we had to adjust. I remember trying to organize meetings with people in Nebraska City via Zoom, or we had a lot of meetings via Google. And even just in terms of community members. All right, let me go take care of this again. I'm remembering. Cool. I would say work from home. We had tried to organize community meetings via Google Meets or Zoom. But like a lot of the people we work with, they don't have computers, they have smartphones, and that's really awkward to have meetings on. Some people weren't used to the technology, and so even trying to teach them how to do it was very hard. That was the year of the presidential elections, and where we would typically go out and canvass and meet folks, like knock on their doors. We weren't able to. We had to make phone calls, and so that was even hard for some of the people we were working with to make those phone calls. Yeah, just trying to like work completely from home. And it was a huge learning curve. We're trying to adjust. People are trying to use Zoom. A lot of folks weren't used to that. Yeah, so it's like getting a lot of folks on board of how to do that.
And how much do you think it affected your work compared to a normal year?
I don't think we were as effective. I mean, it gets down to the point of making phone calls or trying to do things like remote, but I mean, even just knowing the Latino community, like there's that connection when you actually meet with people and go to their house or have meetings, because there's like time to like engage and chat and, you know, read the energy off people, to collaborate. But when it's on Zoom and there's distractions all around, just like I got here, it's super hard to focus, you know, because you got, and even I would say even harder, because a lot of these families, they also had kids at home who had to go to school via Zoom. You're trying to help them with that. Work. You're in a meatpacking plant. That was a hot mess. I just don't think it was impactful because of that person-to-person contact. It's hard when your work is based on relationships and you have to do it via Zoom. I don't think it creates as much trust as you would be able to do if you're in person.
Mm-hmm. And did you change, or the organization did change some of the efforts towards health-related issues in the meatpacking, in voting, and, you know, vaccinations and everything?
So when I was there, we worked on legislation. Yeah, it was a lot of, so we had worked with UNMC, College of Public Health, because some of their public health people were going in to talk to the meatpacking plants, and it was just funny to like hear one side of the story versus what we were hearing from the workers. And I don't recall specifically like what had happened, but having those conversations, so that the conversation we had, because they were going to go to another plant the next day, we just suggested like, hey, you should probably probe on these questions as well, based on what we're hearing. So we were definitely working more with the College of Public Health for sure. Much closer with the unions and other organizations across the state on meatpacking plants, really to improve legislation. And that was one of the pieces of legislation that was introduced this last legislative session, was to provide further protections for workers against COVID. And I think, I remember saying this, I mean, the stories of the workers we'd heard for years about line speed, which was a huge issue. But those are things we knew. It's like the sheet just got pulled back on something you've always known, but I think it became much more public. Yeah.
And as an organization, how do you think COVID affected Heartland Worker Center?
I mean, it was really hard for a lot of organizers. I mean, I remember we had a couple of good meetings with the community in Grand Island, with meatpacking workers in Schuyler, all before COVID, like early March. And like there was a lot of energy to really move things forward, and really work in the community or learn more about your rights as a worker, and to continue to explore that. And it just kind of seemed like everything came to a stop. And I know for a while, like I myself was trying to, it's like, how do you continue these projects when a lot of the community you work with doesn't really want to, I mean, maybe they're tech savvy, because this isn't where they're typically working at. It'd be easy to teach somebody how to use it if you could go in there and like show them physically, but communication, I mean, those meetings and those follow-ups were definitely harder. You want to make sure everyone's safe as well. So you're trying to, you know, come up with those standards and just for your staff. So I know it was hard for them too, because they wanted to go out and meet people and you're like, nobody wants to talk to me. I get that. But it's like, how do you adjust too, you know? So.
Did you lose some of your, well, first, the people you work with got sick because of what they were doing? Or
like our staff?
Yeah.
No, not staff. No, because I mean, we were pretty strict about don't go to these meetings.
Okay.
I don't recall anyone. I know staff did get sick sometimes, but I don't think it was because of work-related things.
Mhm.
Man, that really feels like a long time ago.
Yeah, it does.
I was like, wait, when did all these things happen?
So you changed jobs during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about how was that? Was something that you had been thinking before and this accelerated, or was it due to the pandemic that you got fed up or too tired?
I'd say, I mean, it's probably a combination. I'm sure there's plenty of other people like me. I mean, I'd been thinking for a while of leaving. We did a lot of election work, and I just found it very wearing to have 3 election cycles in Omaha every 4 years. So for me, it just became very redundant. I did get very tired of working from home as well. Like, as I said, I feed on people's energy, and when I can't do that, I feel like my creative juices were just kind of drained. So I'd been there 11 years. That was 11, 12 years, but I just, let's try something else. And maybe that's what COVID is. It's like it shows you that death is imminent. Is that the word?
Yes.
Imminent. And it's too short, to like just go through a routine of life. And so I left, and January 22nd was my last day. But yeah, I feel like and I took 6 months off, which I get it. I come from a place of privilege to do that, but it allowed me the space to, and I think like the mental bandwidth to just see what I really want to do, rest, and just explore some new opportunities and get back to what I want to do. And I mean, I've gotten back to coaching soccer, which is super fun, with 8 and 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds. So, which, helps me to connect back with the community that I really liked working with directly. Not just kids, but, like the parents. And I see people that I've known for years and are able to reconnect with them. So that's been good.
And you also travel in the 6 months, right?
Should I tell you about that?
Yes, tell me about traveling under COVID.
So I went to South Dakota, probably not one of the smartest states to go to. My last day of work was January 22nd, and I went up January 24th, which was a Sunday. And between Saturday, there was a snowstorm on Saturday, and there was a big snowstorm Monday. So I left at like the key day. Went up to Lead, South Dakota, which is in the Black Hills, and stayed. And I mean, I had an Airbnb, which was good. So I was by myself, and the guy who I rented it from, him and his wife, I didn't really mix with them at all. The hardest thing I would say, though, in terms of COVID, and in South Dakota, they had one of the highest rates. I'm pretty sure it's still high. No masking. I didn't have a kitchen in the first place I was staying. So I did go to a restaurant, and people didn't have masks. So I'm pretty sure I contracted COVID. Probably sure I got it from one of those places. So yeah, it's interesting because you still hear about this pandemic going on. This was January, but it's as if people, and I guess I was probably one of them, was just kind of naive to it, I guess. But for me, it was necessary to go someplace where I could be outdoors and hike and get off the computer. And it's gone for 8 days. Went to South Dakota, then went to Scotts Bluff, Gering, Nebraska to go hike out there as well. I was sick already by that time, but just to get it like away from my house. And I think for me, reconnecting to nature was important. So even though I thought I was just getting a head cold, I was still willing to like go out and hike and do things. Because I think I'd just been so enclosed for so long that I couldn't handle it.
And you were hiking in February in Nebraska.
And no, end of yeah, sounds funny, huh? End of January, February. But I had it was not snowing. It was super hot out there. Like, I'm just gonna say, I was out at ¿cómo se llama? Wildcat Hills, which is in Gering, It's a state park. It's beautiful. And it was like super sunny there, no snow. So yes,
Mhm.
hiking in January.
Right. So you contracted COVID at some point in this period.
Yeah.
How bad was it?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I mean,
For you, I mean, for your standards and
Yeah.
compared to what you hear from media.
I mean, I wasn't on a ventilator. I was not hospitalized. I thought I had a head cold, and honestly just went and got cold medicine at the pharmacy, masked up, of course. Took a nap when I had gotten it. But when I felt I had a head cold, I still went out and hiked. So, and then I eventually, like a few days later, lost my taste and smell. So yeah, I was lucky in that way. Even 9 months later, I currently don't feel the after effects, if there are. I mean, because they sometimes exist. I mean, I'm currently training for a marathon, so I'm just glad that my lungs are okay. It wasn't a death sentence for me. My parents had both gotten it around Thanksgiving. So that was very scary because they're not young. But I think I got over it in a couple of weeks.
And you never got any of the lingering effects?
I don't believe so, no. I got my taste and smell back.
Good.
And then do you want to know my other travel story? Because this is what I do when I was fun employed, that's for the record, or taking a sabbatical or whatever. I traveled with my mom, and this was post we had both been vaccinated. So this was it was the middle of May. We went out to Pueblo, Colorado, got on a train, the Royal Gorge train, which is in the southern part, and traveled with my aunt who was also vaccinated. So, and then we went down to Taos, New Mexico, and just walked around. That's Ruby. So it was very different to go from a time of like extensive COVID's obviously there to feeling a sense of freedom having been vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Although we're obviously still using precautions. But it's just a very different feeling. I feel like we're kind of going back to January time.
Mm-hmm. And so you were 6 months on sabbatical, you did travel. How difficult was to get a job afterwards? Or how difficult is to get a job in a setting of a pandemic?
Can you give me a scale? I don't know. I guess I have issues with the word job. Okay. I don't really want a job. I'm working, so I'll say this for the record. I just quit a job after 2 months. Just because I kind of got bored again. But I currently work for an accountant, and I'm gonna up my hours there, so that will be good. I don't know if it's hard to find a job. I don't really want to find a job. I want to create or build something for myself. And I feel like there is now more space to do that. I think I'm trying to surround myself with like strong women who want to rebuild things or change things from what they've typically been and look at building new systems or structures or ways of going about things. And I feel like I'm being able to reconnect with people that have similar mindsets, and want to explore that as well. So I'm finding a job because I got to pay bills, which I feel like because of the relationships I've built up over the last 12 years, that has been helpful. Finding a job that I'd really like to do, like working for MLS. Please listen, MLS. So my plug, is that okay?
What is MLS?
Oh, Major League Soccer or the Women's Soccer League.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would love to do that. But sorry, that plug like distracted me a little bit now. I guess, I mean, I found a job to pay the bills, but I'm also realizing through this that I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I I'd rather get paid more and work a little bit less and have time to create, build, explore some of my own things, which to me provides more energy. I mean, that's why I've gone back to coaching soccer. Like, it provides energy to me. And so I think that 6 months taking the time off has allowed me to kind of reconnect to what I actually want to do and given me time to do that. So
And
maybe it's the pandemic to do that.
so, do you think that the imminence of death that you mentioned before, the living in a time of change, in a pandemic, has affected in anything your approach to a job or what you want to do, or this is also something that has been building up in the last for a long time or for a longer time?
I mean, I think it's, let me see if I answer this. I feel like it's made me refocus on things I want to do. I think the pandemic has, as I said earlier, like really not just pulled back the injustices that you see in meatpacking plants, but everywhere. And I think I'm realizing through this pandemic that I can't make people change. But if that's what it is, then I don't want, if people don't want to change, then I'm like, or work to change things for the betterment of others, then those aren't things I want to be involved in. I think it's just helped me to kind of realign myself with some of the goals that I had when I was younger. Even talking to a friend the other night who lives in Chicago, she's like, I can just hear the energy in your voice, and it's, I mean, I'm trying to meditate more and practice non-attachment than I did before. So that's been helpful too. And just, yeah. Does that help to answer the question? I guess the only other thing I want to say too is I've just been more appreciative to the people who are around me and provide me with like good support and are positive with me. I'm more apt to tell my friends and family that I love them and I mean it, and I want to tell people that I appreciate them. Yeah. I think that's really something that's happened.
And talking about friends and family, during at least the first year between March and December, how often were you in contact with them? Did you ever went to their houses? Did you visit other people?
Not often. I know like we canceled like all of my family events we canceled, especially with my extended family. I did go see my parents sometimes. We'd hang out outside of their house, but much more on a smaller basis. I mean, there were times we canceled Thanksgiving because my parents contracted COVID. I mean, my circle was, I would say, fairly small. I was, I haven't seen my friends in New York for almost 2 years now, even though that's tempting to go see them. Friends I see are just closer here or in Des Moines. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely harder to go see them because that's, for me at least, it's always been something on my mind, like, is this a good idea or not? Or, when, I mean, obviously I assess the risk, but that the piece of COVID is definitely the risk that I'm assessing, These are things that I never really thought of before.
And after you got vaccinated, were you able to do more things with your friends, or you were still, at least the ones here?
Yeah, no, I was like, heck yeah, let's go out. It was like a party, and this was what, for like the last 3 months of COVID, or less, I'd say maybe like May. It was just kind of like a shot of freedom. Yeah, we would go out, we would go to restaurants. One of my friends from Storm Lake would come down, like, because she was vaccinated and felt much more comfortable. Went to go see friends. Like, I gathered with my college friends in August for a weekend. So it provided a sense of comfort, I would say, for us to meet up. So I was like, yes, that's why I traveled too. So
Right. And you also started doing things back in the community, right? You mentioned coaching soccer.
mhm.
How was that
That-
reconnection? Right. How was that reconnection with the community? How did you see the parents of the children that you coach? Did they talk about COVID?
they didn't really talk about COVID, I would say. Um, I started coaching in May. This is all like post-vaccination. Um, so since then, it really hasn't come up. It has allowed me to reconnect. Like I met a woman I met 12 years ago when she used to work at Guadalupe Church. Saw her yesterday when she dropped her daughter off, and I saw her daughter. I was like, "Oh my God, you look like your dad." And the girl's like, "What?" um, so it's like that reconnection with people I haven't seen for a while. I do know of one coach who is that the word, contracted COVID, even though he'd been vaccinated, so he was out for a week. So that was kind of shocking for me to hear, I guess, because now I know of people who are actually getting it post vaccine, but I'm not hearing much from the kids at all, like when they're there. I'm guessing maybe it provides them like an outlook because they can be with their friends outside, not masked up. So they don't really talk about it when we're there.
Mhm.
There are some kids that come with masks. Still, it's not regular, it's not required, but there are some who still wear it.
And in your evaluation, what has been the effect of COVID in the Latino community in South Omaha or in Omaha? Considering that you've worked directly with the community, that you continue working with in different ways with the community between February and January of last year, this year, and that you've seen the changes.
Yeah, I'm using my recall right now. I mean, hearing the stories of people who got sick, the fear of passing that on to your kids, when we would have meetings with workers across the state, and we had meetings with the workers and other nonprofits and then state senators. I mean, listening to how people were impacted or family members were impacted, how the kids of meatpacking plant workers were impacted. A lot of it just wasn't logical. You're like, why do these people have to go to work? I mean, I get why you have to go to work, but why do they have to work in conditions where their health and safety isn't taken into, like, it's just kind of disregarded. I'm gonna go back and say something too, because I just remember this. One thing that we did was to help provide support for undocumented immigrants because they couldn't receive the stimulus package. And I think we began to just help people more on that. And I would get calls all the time, like, hey, so fulano de tal me dio su número. And and you just listen to people's stories, like, I can't pay my rent, I can't do this or this or this, and there's all these stimulus packages going on, or federal support from the CARES grant to help pay for rent, food stamps, unemployment, and just knowing that there's a huge portion of our community that can't access those because of the immigration laws. It's heart-wrenching. Yeah, and just even learning more about how people live, because I would learn more about who rents a room, and you live with all these people. And I'm sorry, I'm just like recalling a little bit, but it's just like, it's such an interest how COVID impacted one population so much, and it's the population that is typically scapegoated, one of the populations, sorry, just one, for societal problems, right? But then they're the ones who are working to, the ones that a lot of workers you don't see, but they're the ones who provide meat or clean the hotels, or build your houses. But then, and they're helping to support our communities, but we as a society don't really support them equally, So I would say it's probably impacted them, the Latino community, more than we realize. And probably will for a while, knowing that a lot of people lost jobs, couldn't get unemployment. There were a lot of people I remember who said that they borrowed money. I don't know if they may still be trying to pay it back, but it was just a matter of survival for a lot of folks.
Mhm. You mentioned at some point that the Latino community or the people you work with, Latinos, need to be together, need to connect physically. Did you see any changes on that connection, on how people connected with each other at that level? Or that you've been part of the Latino community in many ways in the last 15 years, right? Did it change the way you greet people?
I'm much more like appreciative of people. I mean, as I mentioned, like I'm gonna say this. There's one woman that I met in Nebraska City, and this was even before I left. I just started calling her, "Hey, baby girl," which is what I call my dog, one of my dogs. So that is on the record. But just like there's so much more of a connection for me to people, like an appreciation. Like I want to be able to show that I'm grateful for having folks in my life, because I am. And I think, I don't know if that's because I don't know what it is, but I think it's maybe it's me, maybe it's others, maybe it's just not, I don't know if it's just Latinos or not. That's just where I was kind of, where I've been welcomed, I would say. Really provides like a sense of home. But I would say, yeah, just like working to be more present with people and to listen and to show care and appreciation and love, for me has been super important.
Mhm. Abbie, many thanks for all your answers, and those were more or less my questions. Is there something that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you?
No, but you've actually made me think, and I want to go back and review some notes from before about stories. No, I mean, I guess maybe the biggest thing is like, that's shocking, and why I have like this look on my face is this was over a year and a half ago that all of this started. And it seems like we were, plateaued for a while, and then we were, I don't know if plateau is the right word, but like things felt like they were getting better, right? And now we're going back to this again, and reflecting upon some of these stories, like why aren't we doing more to try to stop this? AKA, why aren't more people getting vaccinated? Yeah, it makes me it's making me think a lot more, I would say, more than anything. What has happened all these last 18 months? Definitely been a whirlwind, that's for sure.
Do you have any ideas of how the post-COVID world will be, or at least in terms of work, in terms of the Latino community, in terms of your closer world?
I think for me personally, if I may say that, I know it's like, and again, I probably come from a place of privilege, but like being selective about what I do, and being intentional with that, but also recognizing that I still want to work with the Latino community, with other BIPOC communities, not as some savior, but as some collaborator, some compañera, no? So, but working together, because again, COVID's just shown us that we're not an ideal society like we tell the rest of the world, right? Like we also have issues, so let's work to address them. Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. I'm going to stop recording now.